Welcome to the RLH Project's podcast, Love Matters, where we talk about real academic research mixed with real-life experiences to hopefully improve the real relationships you have with important people in your life. I'm the founder of the RLH Project and the host of the Love Matters podcast, Dr. Jenny Rosier. I'm also an associate professor of communication studies at James Madison University, a wife to my favorite person on the planet, a mother of 4 young children, and an all-around love enthusiast. As an expert in romantic and parent-child relationships, I've dedicated my life to figuring out how individuals can use communication to live happy, healthy lives connected to other people. I hope that this podcast can help you. Hello, friends! This is the first season of the RLH Project's podcast, Love Matters. For season 1, I've decided to do an in-depth 12-episode explanation of a single concept that impacts us all, attachment. I actually teach a class at James Madison University in the School of Communication Studies called Attachment Communication, and much of this season's podcast is based on my lectures from that class. And so that's the plan for season 1 of the Love Matters podcast, an in-depth 12-episode explanation of the science of attachment, with relevant stories from myself and a ton of cool people I know sprinkled throughout. Lucky for you, I'm not just offering a podcast to help you understand attachment. I've also created a 60-page digital workbook that you can purchase through the link in my Instagram bio at Relationships Love Happiness, or on my website, www.relationshipslovehappiness.com. This digital workbook not only complements the podcast, but it also includes extra attachment tips and information not covered in the podcast, and includes self-reflection prompts throughout that will encourage you to dig deep and reflect on your own past and current life experiences. Before you start listening to this episode, get yourself a copy of the Attachment Matters digital workbook. You won't regret it. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. No matter what time it is, no matter where you are, I'm so thankful that you're spending your time with me. Today, in episode 10, I'm going to talk about fearful avoidant, also known as disorganized attachment. Specifically, this episode will give you a deep understanding of what fearful avoidant attachment entails, where it comes from, and what you can say, do, and avoid if you or your partner has fearful avoidant attachment. If you're following along in the Attachment Matters digital workbook, we're still on chapter 6. Imagine desperately wanting to be loved and accepted by others, while at the same time feeling completely terrified to get to that point with anyone. Imagine wanting to self-disclose to your friends or your family or your romantic partner, while at the same time becoming consumed with the assumption that those people will use that information against you. Imagine hating the people you're close to, while at the same time not wanting them to leave you. And imagine wanting intimacy in relationships while also not trusting anyone. Individuals with a fearful avoidant attachment style are often tortured with this kind of cognitive dissonance all of the time. This can cause them to experience significant and many times difficult to cope with stress, especially when talking about relationships. If you've been listening to this season up to this point, you know that this is the last of the 4 adult attachment styles. Episode 7 was about secure attachment. If you remember, they have positive opinions of themselves and positive opinions of others. Episode 8 described anxious attachment. They have positive views of other people, but negative views of themselves. And episode 9 went over dismissive attachment. They have positive opinions of themselves, but negative opinions of others. Fearful avoidants are unique in that they take a little bit from anxious preoccupieds and a little bit from dismissives. They tend to have negative opinions of themselves and negative opinions of others. Like anxious preoccupied adults, fearful avoidants have high attachment anxiety. And like dismissive adults, they have high attachment avoidance. If you remember, attachment anxiety is on a continuum. So is attachment avoidance. Some people have really, really low attachment anxiety. Some people have really, really high attachment anxiety. Most of us fall somewhere in the middle. And that goes for attachment avoidance as well. Attachment anxiety, the amount of attachment anxiety that an adult has and the amount of attachment avoidance that an adult has combine to create one of these 4 attachment styles. Like I've said before, and I'll say again, most people don't fit nicely into one of these 4 boxes: secure, anxious, dismissive, fearful, avoidant. Instead, many of us have a relatively solid attachment style, so like a primary attachment style, but tendencies of a different attachment style. So some of us might be moderately secure and have anxious tendencies, or be moderately anxious preoccupied and have some fearful avoidant tendencies. It's not as common for people to be all the way in one category only, to be extremely dismissive or extremely anxious preoccupied or extremely fearful avoidant or extremely secure. Those people exist. They definitely do. But most of us tend to just be more of one attachment style than the others. So let's get back to fearful avoidance. So fearful avoidants have high anxiety and high avoidance, attachment avoidance. And so this high anxiety and this high avoidance causes them to frequently alternate back and forth between sometimes clinging to their partner or showering their mate with compliments and affirmations, and then other times being cold and unapproachable or even stonewalling their mate. This back and forth can get quite confusing for a relationship partner. But I want to be really clear. If you're dating someone or married to someone, if you're in a relationship with someone who is fearful avoidant and you feel like, wow, this back and forth is really killing me, like this is a lot of stress, I want you to think about how they feel. The cognitive dissonance that a fearful avoidant adult feels on a daily, hourly, minute by minute basis is many times too much to handle. And it can get very, very stressful inside of their head. So the next time you're thinking that the other person is just really throwing you for a loop, I want you to really think about what it feels like to be inside the head of a person who has really low opinions about themselves and really low opinions about others. So their strong desire for intimacy and their serious hesitancy when sharing their lives with others work against each other, making it difficult, but definitely not impossible for fearful avoidants to form and maintain healthy romantic relationships. This doesn't mean that they're not capable of being in romantic relationships. They are. But oftentimes it is just really, really difficult for them to be in a relationship, but also for their partners to be in a relationship with them. When they're actually in a romantic relationship, fearful avoidant adults might emotionally retreat, especially during difficult conversations. They might self-deprecate as they view themselves as unworthy. They might express jealousy due to their trust issues. They might experience separation anxiety and act clingy to a partner. They could become consumed with a serious partner or like overly dependent on that person. And then they can also worry about getting hurt, betrayed, lied to, if they get too close to someone. Unfortunately, this mindset that a fearful avoidant individual has can turn into a form of self sabotage with their friends, their family, or their relationship partners. So it can cause them to end a relationship before it really needs to be ended, or it can cause them to make a mountain out of a molehill. So oftentimes, a fearful avoidant person might fixate on something that a relationship partner said and then make a mountain out of a molehill. So maybe it's something that lots of other people would think was maybe a little less significant. A fearful avoidant person might turn that less than significant comment made by a romantic partner into something that they take apart and dissect and again fixate on and blow up into something that could have been explained by a partner's bad mood or a partner being hungry or a partner being stressed out. So I think it works best if we like think through an example, right? So imagine that you have made a meal for your partner and you are a securely attached adult, and you've made a meal for your partner. So if you've made a meal for your partner and your partner says, "Oh, I just don't really. I don't really like this," or they don't even have to say anything. Let's back it up. Let's make it even more um, less direct. So let's say that your partner just doesn't eat a lot of the meal. So you make a meal for your partner and your partner doesn't eat a lot of the meal. And they seem a little disgruntled during dinner. So you are securely attached and you take this behavior from your partner, likely, as well, they're probably having a rough day. Maybe work was hard. Maybe something happened on the drive home. Maybe they had a late lunch. Maybe they just aren't very hungry. I'll just put it away. That's if you're securely attached. That's your reaction. If you are fearful avoidant, though, and I'm not saying that all fearful avoidant individuals would do this in this situation. I'm just saying this is something that a fearful avoidant person might take away from this situation. So you've made food, you sit down and eat with your partner, and your partner's a little disgruntled during dinner and they don't eat very much of their food. The thoughts running through your head might be, they don't like my food. They must not like me. How rude of them to be disgruntled at dinner. I made this food for them. Um, I don't care if something happened at work, or let's not even say that. I don't think that a fearful avoidant person would very often think of a different excuse for someone's behavior. It is frequently thought that someone else's bad mood is a direct result of them. So why is my partner upset with me? They must be angry with me about something. Maybe they're cheating on me. Oh, maybe that's why I didn't talk to them while they were at work today. Maybe it's because they're cheating on me. Oh my gosh, I think our marriage is over. maybe I should, talk to my mom about coming and living with her. And that's the snowball. It's very similar to the snowball of a anxious preoccupied person, right? So an anxious preoccupied individual does this snowballing as well, except with a fearful avoidant person, a fearful avoidant individual does not have positive opinions of other people. The anxious preoccupied person does have positive opinions of others. And so even though they are spiraling, the anxious preoccupied person is spiraling thinking that it has to do with them and it's all them and they're a bad person and that's why this is happening. And the person's going to leave them because they're a bad relationship partner. They themselves are a bad relationship partner. With a fearful avoidant adult, the idea is a little different. So it's spiraling and snowballing, but it's more like, I'm not that great of a person. I'm not a good partner. I don't deserve to be in a healthy relationship. So of course someone would leave me. And by the way, everyone else sucks too. Everyone else is pretty rotten. So people screw you over the first chance they get. So, I don't really trust that this person is genuine or could be having a bad day. They hate my food, they hate me, and they're a bad person because all people are bad. So, our relationship is doomed. A lot of times, fearful avoidant individuals are very skeptical of their partner's intentions. So even if a partner is being overly kind and overly loving and wonderful, they, in the back of their head, still think or still wonder what their partner's intentions are. Why are they being so nice to me? Why are they telling me that they love me so much? Why, she usually says she loves me at least 3 or 4 times a day, but today it was like 10 times. She must be hiding something. And I think that a lot of fearful avoidant adults, especially if they're in a relationship with someone who is secure, they try to hit those thoughts away. They're like, get out of here, toxic thoughts. I don't want to have you right now. Of course my partner loves me. We're married. We've been together forever. She's not showing any signs of cheating on me. Don't take this tiny thing. Don't take this molehill. She said, I love you 10 times a day instead of the normal 3 times a day. Don't take this molehill and turn it into a mountain. But those thoughts are always there. They're always in the back of their head, creeping their way to the front, influencing how they interact and how they perceive the world around them. Fearful avoidant adults are chronically hypervigilant. So you might hear a fearful avoidant adult say something like, I am really good at reading people, or I'm very observant. They are chronically hypervigilant. And we're going to get to in a couple minutes where all of this comes from, and I think then it will make sense. But they are observant. They are paying attention to every single thing you say and do, and analyzing every single thing you say or do. When I think about a fearful avoidant adult, I often think about like a cyborg, like from Terminator, where they're like, you're looking through the eyes of the Terminator and you can see, and they're like analyzing the situation and looking and getting the person's blood type and who they are and figuring out, how tall they are and what size clothes they wear. And it's like doing all this analysis. I often think about that when I think about a fearful avoidant attachment style, that they are it's just chronic hypervigilance. That's the best way to explain it. They're very aware of their personal surroundings. They're very aware of other people. They're paying attention to all the nuances that most people would not be paying attention to, which adds to their ability to create mountains out of molehills, because they've got a shit ton of molehills that they've been gathering throughout the relationship. They've just been gathering all of these molehills together, and it makes it a lot easier. And they've organized them and put them where they belong, and they remember all of them. And then they can use them to create a mountain, like a problem in the relationship or conflict in the relationship. Fearful avoidant adults have a really hard time believing that their partner loves them. So even if you are proving yourself to your partner, so you are dating someone who is fearful avoidant, and you have really worked so hard to prove to them that you love them, that you accept them for exactly who they are, that you are committed to them, that you are trustworthy. You've done this for years. It is still very difficult for a fearful avoidant adult to believe that this is true. So even if you're 20 years in and you haven't had many issues in your marriage, and there's been no infidelities, and your partner hasn't done anything to make you think otherwise, there's still a small part of you in the back of your head, and sometimes it creeps to the front, that's saying they don't actually love you. It's all fake. It's all a ruse. They're going to find somebody better. They're going to leave me, because that's what always happens. Fearful avoidant adults have this expectation that disappointment, rejection, hurt is inevitable. It will happen. Like I said earlier, a lot of times this turns into a form of self-sabotage, but sometimes it can be like kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. So if you expect and predict that you'll get rejected by your partner, even if there's no signs or I don't know, anything like that. There's like nothing that your partner's doing. And then your partner starts behaving in a way that could maybe possibly one day be a sign. You will start behaving. The fearful avoidant adult will start behaving in a way that could possibly lead to the end of the relationship. So it's this self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, I expect the relationship to end, so I'm going to like pick apart things and pay attention closely and hold on to things and not let go of other things. And then when things start to go south, I am going to expect it, and I'll start behaving in a way that doesn't try to prevent the relationship from ending. So it's not like things are going south and you can't like stop it. I guess what I'm saying is things might go south, and by go south I mean you might get in an argument. Like one argument. And then you might think, oh, well, that must mean the end of the relationship. Where a securely attached person might get in an argument and say, okay, conflict is normal. Arguments are necessary. We can get through this. The fearful avoidant person might think that it is just dire and that there's no getting around it. Something else that a fearful avoidant partner might do is they might often tell their relationship partner, like, I know you're going to leave me. So actively say it directly. I know you're going to leave me one day. Or everybody betrays me at some point, you'll do it too. And so saying things to their partner that, I don't know, I mean, it's kind of like an encouragement almost. It's like, if you're going to leave me, just leave me. I know you're going to leave me at some point, so just leave me now. It's like that self-sabotage. If you are with a romantic partner who has fearful avoidant tendencies or is full-blown fearful avoidant, and they start saying those things, what you need to do is reassure them, because in that moment, they don't actually want to end the relationship. They are scared to end the relationship. They want it to keep going. It's that fear, that anxiety mixed with that avoidance and don't care attitude, right? So it's this, I'm terrified that you're going to leave me, but I also don't want you to think that I give a shit about you. So I'm going to say, if you're going to leave me, just leave me. Everybody leaves me. All relationships end. This one's no different. And so they might say some things that are really hurtful to you during a conflict or during a moment where they feel like things are a little shaky. Before I get into really talking about where fearful avoidant attachment comes from, I think that it's important to explain one more aspect or characteristic of a fearful avoidant adult. So oftentimes, fearful avoidant adults have not learned healthy ways to self-soothe. And unfortunately, this frequently puts them at higher risk for developing mental health issues like substance abuse, aggressive behavior, delinquent behavior, or risky behavior as a teenager, and or abuse of their own children. There's also a pretty strong link in the research between fearful avoidant attachment style and borderline personality disorder. And so a lot of these mental health issues can stem, from their childhood and from their inability to learn healthy coping skills. Okay, let's talk about those experiences in childhood. Many fearful avoidant adults experienced childhood trauma, toxic stress, and or abuse of some kind when they were children. So if you remember from episode 5, where I talked about the evolution of attachment and the impact of trauma, I discussed 3 main types of stress. Positive stress, which is stress that we all have and need to have for healthy development. Things like overcoming a fear of public speaking, or just not even overcoming the fear, you can still be scared, but giving a public speech, performing in front of an audience, getting a shot, doing something really difficult and stressful, but doing it and overcoming it. And then you feel this rush of positive stress. That stress is really important. Then there's tolerable stress and toxic stress. And if you listen to episode 5, I talk about the difference between tolerable and toxic in great detail. So the main difference, I'm not going to go back over all the examples and definitions of those 2 kinds of stress. What I am going to do is talk about the main difference, though. So the main difference between tolerable stress and toxic stress is typically the presence of a supportive, caring, sensitive adult. And so tolerable stress can be anything that is very stressful, but with an adult who is helping a child get through that stress in a loving, sensitive, consistent way. And then the stress becomes tolerable. So individuals could experience like severe childhood trauma and still somehow get through it, whatever that means, but get through it in a more healthy way. And the stress can become tolerable if they have that caring, loving adult to help them go through it, or if the stress is not that severe and they have a caring, loving adult to help them get through it. Now, stress can become toxic, though, when it is extremely prolonged, when it's like constant, it's not ending, it is extremely severe, and you have either no adult to help you get through the stress, or an adult that's not that great at helping a child get through the stress. And so then it can become toxic stress, and even rather minor stressors could become toxic if they are prolonged and there is no adult to help a child downregulate their stress while it is happening. So, individuals who have a fearful avoidant attachment style tend to have experienced this toxic stress or childhood trauma or abuse of some kind. In fact, research has shown that children who experience physical, verbal, or sexual abuse in childhood, 80% of them actually will develop a fearful avoidant attachment style, because oftentimes the abuse comes from a primary caregiver. And so, regardless of whether someone has a loving, caring, sensitive adult with them to help them get through that, like another adult, it is very difficult to overcome because the abuse comes from someone who they were supposed to be able to trust. And so in childhood, fearful avoidant attachment is fostered when children become fearful of their primary caregiver or their attachment figure. So while parents of anxiously attached adults were likely inconsistent in their emotional availability, and parents of dismissively attached adults were likely consistently unavailable, parents of fearfully avoidant adults were often the cause of fear. Interestingly, fearful avoidant attachment is often passed down from generation to generation. It's not genetic, so don't think that that's what I mean. Instead, attachment issues and trauma can be passed down because parents who struggle with unresolved trauma themselves oftentimes have trouble tolerating a range of emotions in their child, and they may react to their kids by trying to scare them into falling in line or into behaving, especially during moments of stress. So the parent may act out destructively, not being fully aware about why they are behaving that way. And so oftentimes, not all the time, but oftentimes a parent engages in physical or verbal abuse with their children because they experienced physical or verbal abuse in their own childhood, and they have yet to actually resolve that trauma or conflict, or sometimes even recognize it as impacting them from their own early lives. And so any person who has not resolved their own trauma or their own childhood issues or childhood toxic stress, if they haven't recognized it, acknowledged it, worked through it, it becomes very difficult for them to then parent their own children in a way that would foster secure attachment. Therefore, fearful avoidant attachment many times arises from fright without solutions. So parents could frighten their children in a number of different ways. It could be through direct abuse or neglect. So directly abusing, neglecting, and scaring the child, like a parent being mean and scaring a child, or hurting a child physically, sexually, verbally, emotionally. But it could also be through that unresolved trauma and loss in the parent's own life that leaves them feeling like general anxiety or general afraidness, which could then unintentionally scare the child. A third reason for fear could be that the child witnessed a traumatizing experience that involved the attachment figure. So a child witnessing a parent verbally, physically, or sexually abusing another parent. So abusing their caregiver or someone else. So they could witness it, they could be the victim of it, or it could be that they observe their parent and they are fearful because their parent is fearful. It's all about fear. Either way, no matter what way it is, the child no longer trusts the caregiver. The child realizes that they cannot rely on caregivers to meet their physical or emotional needs. And then these caregivers who are supposed to act as a source of safety are not only unreliable, but they are causing fear. And then those children are in childhood, it's often called disorganized attachment. They're disorganized and they don't know how to adapt or self-soothe or cope with any of this because they never know what's going to happen next. Their stress response is frequently heightened, and these children tend to lack coherence in their own behavior towards their caregivers. So sometimes they seek closeness, but at the same time, they often reject being close to their caregivers because they are fearful of them. So they want their parent to accept them and love them and be proud of them, but they are very scared of them and want to be away from them as much as possible as well. A lot of times when you hear people talk about the stress response, that fight, flight, or freeze idea, people give the analogy or the example of a bear attacking you, right? So you see a bear and it's in attack mode, it stands up, and you're either going to fight, flight, or freeze. So you're going to fight it, you're going to run away, you're going to freeze and not know what to do. With some tolerable stress or stress that hasn't really become toxic yet, that's all that it is. It's a bear attacking you one time, and you get through the attack somehow. Like, let's say you don't die. You get through the attack somehow. You either fought it, or you ran, or you froze and it wasn't interested in you because you froze. Regardless of how it happened, you got through the attack and the attack was over. And it was really scary. It was really stressful. It probably could have been positive stress, but it could have also been tolerable stress. But what if the bear lives with you? And the bear is frequently agitated and is frequently yelling, screaming, and attacking you. And you have to tiptoe around the bear in fear that something you say or do could set the bear off. That's what is happening in the childhood of a fearful, avoidant adult. They were often tiptoeing around the caregiver that was causing them so much stress. And even when there wasn't active attacking happening, that tiptoeing is really fucking stressful too. It's really stressful. That tiptoeing around the person as a small child, wondering if what you say or do today is going to cause the bear to attack you. Like I said a few minutes ago, it's not just about direct abuse or neglect. It could be an unbelievably toxic, scary life event that causes this immense amount of fear. Or it could be a parent who is very scared or fearful of things themselves that makes you fearful of the environment around you. So a parent who is not calm, cool, and collected, a parent who is consistently talking about conspiracy theories or talking about how the world is not a safe place to be. And that can make you then become really scared as a small child. So it's not always that you are scared of a primary caregiver. It could also be that you are scared because a primary caregiver is not giving you any amount of safety, like no feelings of safety. And so you are constantly scared. The world is a scary place to be. It is. We know this as adults. But it's our job as parents to scaffold our children so that they do not have to experience all of the scary stuff. And oftentimes, a parent of a fearful avoidant individual does not scaffold them, allows them to be privy to all of the scary things that could happen in the world. I'm not saying that we should lie to our kids and not tell them anything, but there are certain things that they do not need to know about at certain ages. There are just certain things they don't need to know about. They can wait till they're older to learn about those things. Our jobs as parents is to make our children feel safe and secure, positive about themselves and positive about other people. That is our job as parents. Lots of times when I talk to people about fearful avoidant attachment, the response is overwhelmingly, wow, anyone who has that attachment must be screwed. I am here to tell you that no one with any kind of attachment is screwed. Attachment is not set in stone. There is an attachment foundation that is developed in early childhood that sticks around with you, but you can build on top of that foundation. You can build on top of it. And I'll talk about that in greater detail in the next 2 episodes of the Love Matters podcast. But let's talk right now about things that you can do, say, and avoid if you have a fearful avoidant attachment style. So just like my advice for the other 2 insecure attachment styles, the first thing you can do is educate yourself about fearful avoidant attachment. And in the show notes of this episode, I will put a link to a great book about fearful avoidant attachment that I think anyone who has it should read. The second thing you could do is to become more self-aware. After you've experienced an anxious or avoidant thought or moment or week or month, think carefully about what might have triggered it or what might have caused it. Reflect on your past experiences. Really contemplate how your past has molded your current feelings and do it with an attachment lens. If this is the first episode that you are listening to for this season of the Love Matters podcast, I suggest that you go back to episode 1 and start from the beginning. Listen from the beginning all the way to where we are now at episode 10. Learn as much as you can about attachment and reflect on your past experiences while you're listening. Be open to talk about your attachment style and tendencies with other people, especially your romantic partner. Realize that most people have good intentions and that the world is generally a safe place to be. Try to be more positive by actively incorporating some positive habits into your daily life. Give people second and third chances. You know, when I was growing up, I remember watching my dad. He had more of a anxious, preoccupied attachment, and he would give people second and third and fourth and fifth chances. And I used to think, come on, man, that person like screwed you once and then they screwed you twice, like get rid of him. But he was just such a generous, trusting person. And he felt like people gave you a hard time because they were having a hard time. And so he would forgive people. And I look back at that now and realize that it was pretty great to have that kind of forgiveness in your heart and to be willing to give it to so many people. And I'm betting that some of those people remember the forgiveness and the grace that he gave to them. Fearful avoidant individuals many times, like a dismissive individual, might give people one chance, maybe 2, and then they're done. Try to give people third chances. Understand that people typically give you a hard time when they are having a hard time. Other people are going through some shit too. It's not just you. And I think that that is one of the lessons to take away from learning about attachment. And again, I'll talk about that in the next episode. Understand that everyone is not out to judge you. Give up some of your desire for approval from others. Just be the best version of yourself and try not to worry about other people's opinions. Recognize that your partner has little to do with your feelings of anxiety. It is more about you and less about them. Regularly make lists about things you're good at, things people like about you, positive things happening in your life, and things you're grateful for. Gratitude is one of the best ways to introduce more positivity into your life. And as always, please, please, please seek professional help if you have the means to do so. There are therapists who focus on attachment theory. Find those therapists and make one of them your therapist. Now let's talk about some things that you could say if you have fearful avoidant attachment. So express what you're afraid of. Say to your partner or to your friend or to your parent, it all comes down to my fear of being alone and not being loved. Tell them. Tell them what is making you scared. Practice positive self-affirmations like, I'm worthy of love. I'm enough. I'm a good person. I deserve to be happy. And just like I posted a link to some awesome self-affirmation cards that I found online in the Anxious Preoccupied show notes, I will repost them in the Fearful Avoidance show notes. Express that you're feeling anxiety when you feel it. Tell your partner what your triggers entail. Now, the first thing you have to do is figure out what your triggers are before you can tell them, because lots of fearful avoidant people don't even realize what their triggers are. So that self-reflection is really, really important. Figure out what your triggers are and then tell your partner something like, when people I care about don't text me back right away, I take it personally. Or I can't help but think that people don't like me if they pause after I ask them to do something with me. Talk about ways to cope with your anxiety and to cope with your avoidance. Tell your partner when their actions made you feel anxious or avoidant. Something like, I feel anxious when you do that. Or when this happens, I want to avoid everyone. Figure out how you can cope with the stress that you're feeling. And this is going to be difficult because you have not figured this out in your life so far. And so it can be really hard for you to figure it out as an adult. You haven't had many healthy coping strategies gifted to you from an attachment figure. And so it can be difficult for you to figure it out as an adult. I will also post in the show notes of this episode a book with lots of healthy coping strategies. So I suggest that you get both of the books that I'm going to post in the show notes and the self-affirmation cards or ones similar to it, and start reading and practicing and go back to the beginning of this season and listen to all of the episodes about attachment. Some things that you should avoid. You should always avoid giving up on a relationship too soon. You should avoid listening to your own self-deprecating thoughts. You are amazing. You are wonderful. You have qualities that people really like. People really like you. You are worthy of love. Do not listen to those self-deprecating thoughts. Avoid focusing and dwelling on a bad experience. This is called ruminating, and it is extremely unhealthy. Extremely unhealthy. But fearful avoidant adults very often will ruminate on a bad experience. Avoid second-guessing your decisions. Avoid second-guessing your self-concept. Avoid making blanket statements about relationships or groups of people. Avoid jumping to conclusions or exaggerating your own or other people's negative qualities. Avoid feeling completely defeated based on a few experiences. Experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. I'll say that again. Experience is what you get when you didn't get what you wanted. Securely attached individuals understand that statement and they live by it. Work really hard to believe that when you don't get what you want, You did get something. You got an experience. You learned something. You need to avoid worrying about what other people think about you and your life. Okay, so let's imagine now that your partner has a fearful avoidant attachment style. What can you do, say, and avoid if your partner is experiencing fearful avoidant attachment or fearful avoidant tendencies? So here's some things that you can do. The first thing is to educate yourself about fearful avoidant attachment. You might also benefit as the partner of a fearful avoidant adult. You might benefit from the book that I am going to link in the show notes. So take a look at that. Have open discussions about other successful relationships that you admire with your partner. Express an interest in reading books and articles about improving romantic relationships. Understand that giving your partner emotional disclosure space sometimes is necessary. Understand that your own behaviors generally have little to do with your partner's anxiety or avoidance. Listen actively to your partner's relationship needs. Try to empathize with their experience. Put yourself in your partner's shoes. Think about how it must feel to feel that cognitive dissonance in their head. Accept that your partner will likely feel anxiety or avoidance about things that you have little or no control over. Here's some things that you can say. Be accountable. Say things like, we've both made mistakes. It's not all on you and it's not all on me. We're in this together during conflict. This is really important. Express your trust. Say things like, you can count on me. And then follow through with those claims. Make sure your partner can count on you. Take the time to remind your partner of the times where they did the right thing, when they made good choices, when they helped you, and when they made you feel loved and secure. Tell them this often. Offer commitment assurances. Things like, I'm not going anywhere, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us. Build up their self-esteem because their self-esteem is pretty low. Say things like, you're the greatest thing that's ever happened to me, or I love how caring you are, or you're really good at blank, fill in the blank. Convey your love. Say things like, you are my person and I love you. You might have to say these things more than you would in another relationship. This is where that whole comparing yourself to other people's relationships is not that healthy, because every relationship is different. Every combination of two people is different. Make sure that you express empathy by acknowledging and validating their feelings. Things like, it's okay for you to feel angry. I would be angry too. I just don't want you to hold on to that anger for too long because I love you. And then, as always, there's some things that you should avoid. First, avoid using dry humor or sarcasm, combative language, and ultimatums, especially during conflict. These things do not help the conflict get resolved or managed. Avoid hiding experiences or parts of your life from your partner. Your partner will take that as a betrayal, as a loss of trust, and it will be very, very hard to get back to a homeostasis with your partner. Avoid minimizing their feelings. Avoid using your partner's anxiety against them to hurt them. Avoid getting defensive if and when your partner becomes jealous or accusatory. And avoid using absolutist language like always or never to describe behavior, as your partner could then take your statements as not true. So when you say things like, I would never cheat on you. Even if you believe that to be true, I would never cheat on you. The mind of a fearful, avoidant adult cannot believe that, because their immediate thought is, well, you can't know the future. You can't know for sure that you would never do something. So, he must be lying, because he can't, how could he be sure? He has to be lying. Wonder if he's cheated on me already. Maybe that's it. He's probably already cheated on me, and he's trying to say that he'll never cheat on me to make me believe that it hasn't happened already. Oh my gosh. You can't use absolutist language. You shouldn't use it in normal, everyday relationships, because people rarely always do something or never do something. Human behavior just isn't that absolute. But when you have a fearful, avoidant relationship partner, you need to work harder at avoiding using that kind of language. Even if you're trying to say something nice, like, I would never cheat on you. I think it's okay to say things like, I will always love you. I don't know, although some very fearful, avoidant adults could take that I will always love you, which is a super positive, happy thing, and twist it around. At the end of the day, having fearful, avoidant attachment is not a relationship death sentence. You can earn security in your relationships. You can resolve your past childhood trauma and move past it. Not forget about it, but move past it and become a better version of yourself. You can. But it's going to take a lot of self-reflection, a lot of honest self-reflection, a lot of forgiveness, and a lot of empathy. Because chances are, if you feel this way, one of your parents probably did too. Thank you all so much for joining me for episode 10 of season 1 of the Love Matters podcast. If you're following along in the Attachment Matters digital workbook, this episode went over information from chapter 6. Again, I am your host, Dr. Jenny Rosier. And as always, you can find me on Instagram at Relationships Love Happiness, on Facebook and YouTube by searching for the Relationships Love Happiness Project, and on the web at www.relationshipslovehappiness.com. I hope you'll join me for episode 11, where I plan to talk about becoming more secure. Thanks for listening.